this was my second year running the race, and unlike the first time around, this year there was 36 canards in the race, and a total of, I think, 87 airplanes. It was pretty much the largest air race to ever be held in North America that I know of, I think that any of us knew of. And that includes some of the Bendix races in the 30s and so forth. The amazing thing is, in 2002, the first year I ran the race, there were a total of 4 canard airplanes, which was obviously an astounding change. And that really made me feel really great about everything. A lot of effort went into promoting it to the canard community, and those guys really came through. In some cases, guys flew all the way across the country to meet at Suffolk and Manio for the start of the race. It was amazing. It was excellent. I really don't know how to express the way that made me feel. Well, this year, it was kind of, how would I put it? It was different. It was probably too big. But the logistics just to make this whole thing happen amazed me. The guys that pulled this off, the race committee, Eric White and Eric Anderson, they really worked miracles. They did it last year, they did it in 2003, and I imagine they'll do it again in 2004.
What a gorgeous morning it was, with the sun up and coming up, and it was nice and cool out, and Frank and I had a whole bunch of stuff, and we just didn't want to carry it all with us, so I ran all over the place trying to find somebody that could throw our stuff in their airplane, and finally we found the guys with the Cirrus and threw our stuff in there, all our bags, and they carried that all up to Dayton for us, and we got the airplane all prepped, and we all kind of stood around for fire up, and they fired up engines. Guys were taxiing out, and one after another they were taking off, and they called our number, and we jumped in the airplane, got it all fired up, ready to go, and taxied out, and we were all set. Everything was planned, and we were comfortable, ready to go.
Okay, ready to rock and roll.
We blasted off, and as soon as we get airborne, all of a sudden the smell is a little bit of fuel, so I was a little hesitant about the odor of fuel in the airplane, but just after a couple, maybe a minute, it just dissipated and went away, so I figured it wasn't really going to be a big problem at all.
2, race 41, runway 23, turn right on 4, square 410 up.
You smell that fake fuel? That's what I was talking about, man.
Damn. Yeah, I smell a lot of it.
Sure, we departed out of Manio, and then headed basically up the coast towards the first flight monument. This year I actually launched behind number 24 Edgar Flag. And Edgar, it's hard to explain what Edgar did though, and not to screw up the times, I didn't want to cut him off and actually go direct to the monument, because he was kind of heading up along the barrier islands instead of direct to the monument, which would have put him right down the runway. So the way he was running, instead of crossing the starting line the way he should have, he crossed it at a 90-degree angle. So I fell in behind him and figured I'd roll in and pick up the starting line. Didn't matter that I didn't have, that I lost speed at that point, because our time didn't stay. Plus I got a nice view of the coast and everything. It was a very nice start to the flight.
Standby, mark.
So we crossed over the monument, and Eric tells us have a good flight.
Have a good flight, Frank.
We started our flight. And we decided today that we were gonna go for altitude. It looked, the way we calculated the winds, the best winds for us were going to be around 10,000 feet. Normally, it's kind of a strange thing when you're flying west. The prevailing winds in the summertime are really in your face, so you want to stay as low as possible. Well, in this case, it was different. The winds up higher were better. So we decided to do a nice cruise climb, Brad and I, and we figured we'd start testing the winds around 8,000 feet and then 9,000, 10,000 feet. And sure enough, that's what we did. But it was interesting as once we got out over the sound past the starting line. It was really beautiful. The way the clouds were set up, and it was lovely. It was calm, smooth air. We were already passing Edgar, so we already knew we had somebody beat. It was kind of a nice feeling at that point. And trying to check in with Washington Center, it was almost comical. It was one of those things where he would hear every other word I said. I could hear him fine. He didn't hear me. Actually, I have it on tape, that whole debacle. It's ridiculous.
Give me the type aircraft designator on the, I guess that's all I need.
Okay, type aircraft, very easy for race 20, cruising up to be 9.5.
Okay, 9.5. Give me that type one more time slowly, I'm sorry.
Victor, Echo, Zulu, Echo.
Okay, one more time, I got the Zulu Echo part. The first part was cut out.
Victor, Echo, Zulu, Echo.
Victor, Echo, Zulu. Okay, playing golf.
We didn't get too far, and all of a sudden I noticed out the right side I saw this long easy ahead of us, and we were actually catching up to him. I'm not sure who he was, and we still to this day don't know who he was, but he was the first one that we passed, and that's kind of a thrill when you're flying a 90 horsepower airplane and you're passing a long easy. You probably got a 235 in there or something, you know. That was kind of a thrill. So we got some video footage of him.
I haven't identified him yet, though.
Yeah, he's going by. So long easy. So long easy. Got the lower winglet. So long easy. Big straight. Put it to him.
So we climb up to, we ended up going like 10,500 feet and heading west. And back down to 9,000, up to 11,000, all these different altitudes, just playing the wind game, just trying to find the best speed that we could. It was interesting because there was another guy that was going to be a close run with us, a guy named Ed Masterson. And he was listening to the same frequency and talking on the same frequency. So every time, and we were ahead of him, we launched ahead of him. So every time he would hear us make an altitude change, he would match the change. So I'd say, you know, center, race 20, we're going to go to 10,500. Not 5 minutes later, or a couple seconds later, I'd hear Ed say he was going to 10,500. So we decided we'd play a little game with him there too, and try to beat Ed, because we knew at one point that the winds were better at 8,005. So when we switched frequencies, we knew he wouldn't switch for a few minutes. So as soon as we switched, I requested a different altitude, and it was at 8,500 feet, and I wanted to be there before Ed got on the frequency, so he wouldn't know I actually descended. And it was that kind of a chess game going on. At one point I wanted to switch while we were on the same frequency, and he didn't know where I was altitude-wise, so I wanted to tell center that I wanted to go up 2,000 feet from where I was. Sure enough, he announced, he said, "Oh, so you want to go to 10.5? And sure enough, Ed heard that, and he knew. It was interesting. It was a lot of fun. It took some of the time out of it. A lot of that flight, we were on top of a broken cloud layer. It was really, really beautiful up there. Again, it was smooth, calm. It really didn't feel much like racing. At one point, we flew over Shenandoah Valley Airport, which is really interesting. It's a unique airport. It's on cut off the top of a mountain, and it's just a strange-looking thing. When you're at 10,000 feet and to look down a few thousand below you, there's this large runway just cut off the top of a hill. And I think we took some pictures of that, and then Brad took some shots over the back of his, back of his shoulder, and I did some turns to try to, just put something on film. It cost us a few seconds, but it was worth it. We did a lot of things like that. At one point, he took the camera over my shoulder, and it was really interesting because he had never done that before. He had never moved around the cockpit, and as soon as he did that, I really felt the airplane have a change in pitch. So I had to pitch full aft trim just to fly level, and I had to apply some pressure to the stick to keep the airplane in level flight. So he's shooting over my shoulder with the camera, and it was really kind of neat. And so I'm explaining some of where we are, how long we'd been flying. I think it was we had flown 300 miles in 2 hours. So really, it's not great. It was 150, well, that's nautical miles, so we were doing 150 knots, which is not the best. But it's really not terrible either when you consider that we had that climb under our belt. We're up at 10,000. And we had another, I think, 170 miles to go. So with the descent, if we calculate it properly, it was about an hour to Dayton.
Okay, we're just out of Summersville, West Virginia. We're about an hour out from the first pit stop. And it's about 170 miles. And let's see, we've been flying for...
Like a transponder lost it.
A second, here we go. We've gone 300 miles in 2 hours.
Range 56, Charleston, North 301.
And our max speed so far was 170 knots. That was probably right at the monument.
Approach is range 58, but you at 8,300. 58, Charleston, North 301.
So we did the math and we figured out when would be the best time to descend. That way we could be just getting down to the pattern altitude as we approached the checkpoint, the pylon turn. Now, the pylon turn, this is a little different. It's quite different than it was the previous year. In 2002, the way that the flights launched, they launched the unlimited guys and then the faster classes to the slower classes. And last being the sprint class, which was the class I'm in, smallest engine, you know. And the problem there was guys were landing in Dayton hours before we even took off. So they didn't want to do that with 87 airplanes. It'd be about a 12-hour window that the finish line would have to be open. So the guys would never be able to get out of the starting line, get to Dayton, and set up. It would be, the logistics would have been impossible. So what they chose to do this year was, or in 2003, was they launched the sprint guys first and then progressed in speed to the unlimited. And what that caused, when the sprint guys is about a 3-hour flight to Dayton, and then the unlimited guys is about a 2-hour flight to Dayton, and it's about an hour to get everybody going, or two, you know, what you would end up with is you'd end up with about a 15-minute window at Dayton, at the pylon, where every one of those 87 airplanes was going to cross at the same time. And that's pretty much how it went. So back to the descent, we started descending to Dayton approach, and it was still very smooth and calm. We had seen a few airplanes. We passed a couple blew by us. You know, the Berkut, Charlie Bracken went by us. He was doing 300 miles an hour. And, you know, we were doing half of that. And sure enough, we got a picture of that, actually. That was neat. We passed a few other long easies, and we were passed by some RVs, some larger engine airplanes. So we saw a little bit of both, you know, give and take. It was nice to pass somebody.
Hey, I finally passed somebody in a race.
Yeah, really.
Yahoo!
First time, we got it on tape.
So here we are. We started to descend, and it's still calm, but as we get lower and lower, things start to get more and more exciting. You start to hear more traffic and more chatter on the radio.
You know, everybody was calling in. They were coming over, you know, they were calling out a half a mile, 5 miles. They were calling all different distances and stuff, and all I could think of was, well, I hope I can get this on the video and get a good shot of this going over it.
Columbus departure.
Traffic,
Right 265 out.
Mark.
Range 53, very short final.
Mark.
Race 62 is 3 out.
13 miles.
93, 5 out.
93, 5 out. 89 is 6.6
Race 19 is making a right downwind for runway 20.
Range 53, right downwind.
Race 62 is 2 out.
Circling off to the west. What is that one?
30. Hang a right, Misha.
Race 7 1.5 out. Race 7 1.5 out.
Is at 1,200 feet on right downwind. I have one in front of me.
Range 53, turn the right base. Is there anybody else ahead?
Race 89 is 4 out.
Race 94 tower, 16 out.
Ready, mark. Thank you.
Race 63 is right base, wide, right downwind, about 1.
Okay, race 19 is making a modified out pattern on the right downwind for 20. I have 2 in front of me. Is there anybody else?
It's 30, downwind 20.
Hey guys, the pattern, keep your veteran short, okay?
Race 93 for final.
Race 89, 2 out. Aircraft coming to the finish line. What's your number?
Race 93.
93, gotcha. Ready? Mark!
Here's the engine.
Yeah.
Race 63 is right base. Race 62 is right downwind 20.
Aircraft mile off from the finish line. Your number? 89. Tower now. 89, gotcha. Race 20 is 8 miles.
30 base.
Race 45, 20 miles.
Race 72, 4.5 out.
89, mark! Race 19 is extended right base for runway 20.
We were down to about 1,200 feet in that ballpark. And I'm not sure why we got that low. But I really, in retrospect, looking back at it with hindsight being 2020, I wish I hadn't done that. Because in 2002, the first year I ran the race, I didn't see the airport, the pylon. And I didn't understand how I could have missed it. I mean, I had a GPS, and I had landmarks, and I had photographs of the approach to the pylon, and I couldn't see how I missed. I mean, I was on course, and there were these 2 fuel tanks that were 2 miles off the end of the runway, and where's the runway? I don't see it. So in 2002, I ended up pitching, looking over my right shoulder, and sure enough, then I saw it. I ended up going into the pylon. Well, this year I figured, okay, this time I've got it. You see the tanks, just press on, you're on course, you'll see it this time. Well, guess what happened? I didn't see the damn thing. I had no idea where it was. So I'm flying in, I'm asking Brad, hey, do you see this? What's going on? And then I see this, what looks like a runway, in the excitement, I guess. So I start heading for that, thinking it is, and then I realized, no, it's not. It wasn't a runway, it was just a road, like a highway that was around the trees. This way it looked like the runway. So then I figured, well, I better turn right, because that's where my nav unit says the runway is. So I start turning, I look over my shoulder, and I see all these guys, just dots, and you can tell they're really screaming down. And I can make out 1 or 2 distinctive, and they were both long, and they were heading right, for the finish line, because they were high coming down. Now the problem was, and why I didn't see the runway both years, was there was one runway going this way. It's 20 and 20, and then runway 9, which was the pylon. Well, it was masked by these very, very tall trees on this side of the runway. So if you were anywhere below basically 2,000 feet approaching the airport, you couldn't see the airport. You needed to be much higher to see it. So both years I was down too low, and all I could see was the trees. I never saw the field. So the way I picked it up actually this year is by when I made my turn and I saw those guys coming downhill, I knew it was over there. So I started making radio calls saying, like, 2 miles out. I'm 1 mile out, but there's guys coming right behind me.
Race 20 is inbound. It's going to be a tight one. There's somebody else coming right up my end.
I'm going low.
Southbound regional, Dr. Star 203.
Well, I had blown off, I was down low and level, and we were running really hot, so throttling back a little bit and making turns, we'd lost a lot of our inertia, a lot of our energy. And we just couldn't really, we weren't screaming like we were a few minutes earlier. These guys, on the other hand, just came out of 20,000 feet, 10,000 feet, and just boogieing on downhill. So they're doing about 250, 300 miles an hour to our 150, 160 miles an hour. So doing the quick, dirty math in my head, I realized, well, we're pretty much going to hit the finish line at the same time, and I don't even know if they see me. So I cut them off, and I'm making the radio calls saying, hey, they're right behind me, I'm cutting in now, and the finish line guys are like, you know, who's this? Which one are you? And I'm like, race 20, and this guy's like, 94, race 78, all these different guys are, everybody's hitting lines. So I'm sure if we roll in, line rolling. And I'm like, race 30 is rolling, and right now there's somebody coming right on my ass, you know? And bang, sure enough, here comes Jay Blum right behind. Number 78.
We're out here.
Right behind him, I think it was 94, then 45, and it was like boom, 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 boom. Everybody's hitting the line at the same time. It was hairy. It was bumpy. The visibility was awful. It was like maybe 3 or 4 miles. Airplanes everywhere. It was a zoo, but it was exhilarating. I've never been so thrilled to be frightened. And I swear, I was swearing a lot too. But, it makes for some colorful TV. At any rate, so we crossed the finish line. I'm like, I'm out of here. Great. So we basically extended just to kind of deconflict out of the area, and figured we'd clear and then try to land. Problem is, the pylon's this way, the landing is this way. So you basically had to exit, come around, and land underneath the pylon, the guys that are still crossing the pylon. The problem was, with so many airplanes at the pylon, you really couldn't always pick your altitude. In fact, at one point I think I said, I'm going low, because I wanted, those guys were going to pass at like 50 feet. I wanted to be at 25 feet going over the pylon. But the problem was at 25 feet, somebody landing just a little bit long is just going to be right under me going 90 degrees out. So it was hairy. So sure enough, I ended up coming around. I get on final approach, I get a nice long, very flat approach, because there's still guys coming up the finish. So as I'm approaching the field, I'm pretty much fixated on the numbers, and I'm seeing airplanes still crossing the finish line. And I'm seeing guys coming in, and that's where my attention was. You know, I was flying the airplane and all, but I never noticed these landing lights, approach lights basically, that were sticking up, and they weren't orange or white. They were
roll that out, would you please?
Runway lights, holy shit.
The landscape. And at the very last second, right before I nailed one of them, I saw them. And
Damn, that was scary.
landing lights! Whoa! Sure, it made a decent landing, rolled out, and then, you know, it calmed down. And, whew! I gotta tell you, that was one of them moments. That was one of those, almost died like 5 times in about the span of 30 seconds or a minute.
And we came right up on those lights, and then Frank noticed them, and we kind of humped right over top of them and got her on the ground. It was like, oh boy, Miller time. It was fun. It was a lot of fun.
It was fun. Yeah, it was just thrilling. It was euphoric. There's really no better word than euphoric. Would I do it again? You betcha. Oh yeah. I can't wait. I hope I get to do it a couple times this year. But you live and learn, and you know, hopefully you live when you learn. So we parked at Dayton, and then we stayed overnight. It was great, and ended up staying there for 2 days, because the next day it rained all day. The weather stunk between Dayton and Oshkosh. So that delayed us the whole time. We hung around the hangar all day long. You know, it was awful. It was really crummy. But Tuesday morning, boy, oh boy, you want to talk about beautiful, gorgeous, gorgeous morning. Got up, I was up at 4 every morning, from the day I left to the day I came home. Just the excitement, and I could never sleep. So we get up Tuesday morning, get out to the airport, and man, it was glorious. It was a glory day. That's how I refer to it. Beautiful sunrise. I was at my plane before the sun came up. I got some pictures, in fact, of people walking in, everybody showing up on the buses to that wonderful sunrise and get their airplanes ready. It was excellent.